Okay, welcome to the Extraordinary Living Podcast. This is episode 4 of the Wellness Education module. And today um, we're talking about your story. And from a healing facilitator's standpoint, um, our job is to invite other people into their story so that they can extract more context out of their story and to live the life that they want to live, rather than to be impressing upon them our particular story, because they don't really care about that. They care about their story. And um, so the deal is that we all run and administrate our lives based on the story that we've learned from our government education, the education that our parents or guardians gave us, and maybe our professional education, amongst other things. And so our this kind of comes from that place of like, um, our educated intelligence is that which is programmed by the structure that we live inside of. And we've alluded to this in other podcasts, where if you grow up in the Central African Republic, your the context, the storyline that you grow up inside of is vastly different than if you grow up in Colombia, or you grow up in Uruguay, or you grow up in Houston. And so the storyline, is so much governed by the culture that you're in. And so then this creates so much of the perspective that you're going to be coming from. And we've been talking about various states of consciousness. And so culture imposes upon you a storyline about gods, religion, the lack of gods, the lack of religion, the number of different ways that a person can identify what's good, bad, right, wrong. And, you know, um, and so we live inside of a controlled storyline, and the story makers, these people are hip to this kind of um, ability to sway culture. And this is where, that's where real power exists. Now, human beings are resourceful, and we can shift our state of consciousness, and so then we can kind of see through that. But that it takes kind of an intrepid adventurer to even, investigate life enough to pay attention to the possibilities of this even being, part of reality. And so we want to know that, I mean, there are lots of different types of intelligence, and educated intelligence is what's constructed by schools, television, the various screens, newspapers, magazines that you've read, educational facilities. All of these things, they really impact your educated intelligence and then control the way that you think by and large. And then there are other intelligences, whether it's a maternal intelligence that a mother would have with her baby, and she just knows that she knows. And there's an innate intelligence in the body that just does what it does, and it does it with 100% of its capacity. And you don't have to like try to control um, like your innate intelligence, and there's not a lot of modulation to your innate intelligence you can do. You can kind of remove interference of innate intelligence, but you're not going to improve upon it. You're not going to improve upon its intelligence, but you could remove some of the clutter. And so the various intelligences, um, they are things that if you become aware of them, then the situation seems to be that you become more an active participant in the direction that you're sailing your ship. And you only have to make slight adjustments to the directionality or how the direction your ship is going to end up in vastly different directions. And even though you won't be able to control, that you won't be able to control the wind or the waves, but you can control the set of the sails. And and that these kinds of old ideas inside of the healing arts, they can kind of seem a little bit trite, but they're also really powerful. Like, the wind blows on all of us, that they're just not inside of our control. The turbulence is not necessarily inside of our control, but the way that we look at things and the way that we set our sails and the direction that we're facing, those things are up to us, and these are good to understand. And um, so what I want people to know is that it's okay to be really involved in your own story. And as a healing facilitator, I know that it's my job to invite others to participate more deeply in their story. And so um, the deal is that whatever the storyline is that we're inside of, and of course, the more awareness that you bring to this, then the more um, you're going to be able to navigate the better you're going to be able to navigate your life. At least that's my perception of things. Because you know whatever your storyline is, to a greater or lesser degree, you're going to participate in the construction of your story, but some of it is just definitely imposed upon you. And the story that you make up, it's like you're then quite quite honestly going to justify your actions and behaviors based on your storyline, regardless of whether the storyline is true or not. And we've seen so much of this stuff over the last number of years. This recording is in 2025, and we can I've watched many times where you can just show somebody evidence from peer-reviewed journal articles or whatever that conflicts with their whatever their storyline is, and they can't see it. And that's a really interesting phenomenon, that presented with evidence, a person can't see it. And that gets into psychology at a deeper level than I really understand. But I know that it's true, and it can, and I'm sure that there are, blind spots for me also. But this is just, I just want to acknowledge that I recognize that I have people in my life that, you know, it's like you can show evidence of something, but they can't believe it because they're defending their storyline. And so people, we have the tendency to defend our story, because if it's challenged, the implication of our story being wrong, like if we're wrong about something, this is the framework, this is the house of cards that we've built up. It constructs our reality. And so if somebody starts to shake the foundation of your reality, then then it's going to put you into chaos. And as we'll cover um, in the child development program section of this program, just a real simple fact of the matter. And this phenomenon that I'm going to talk about for a second, it comes from many different situations, so this isn't the only one. But if when a child is born, um, it's not put at the left breast and making eye contact with mom, and it neurologically does not shift from the adrenal dominant, cortisol dominant stress situation, if those hormones don't drop out of the body by the confirmation that it's safe with mom. So this would be a lack of completion of the birth process. Not that the baby's not out of the body, but the term is birth completion, when the baby feels safe and the endocrine system starts to shift. The baby um, will stay inside of a stressed space, and it sets up an asynchronous rhythm between its breathing pattern and its heart rate. And so when confronted with any kind of chaos later in life, it will immediately have the stress response. And if you're living in an overwhelming, complicated world or life situation, and everybody's life is relatively stressful these days with all the screens and all the data that we're processing and all this stuff, that just a little bit more chaos, just of somebody, trying to help you, showing you some piece of evidence, but it shakes your story structure. It'll put you into a little bit of chaos, and you'll have a sympathetic response from that. And we know that when that happens, the blood flow to the cortex just kind of shuts down. It goes to the hindbrain. The person becomes reactionary. They are not very responsive, and they don't think clearly. They lose an open mind, and so we defend our storyline, and we defend our storylines for very good neurological reasons and other psychological reasons, and I'm sure all of that stuff is intertwined. I'm more well versed in the neurology and in the endocrine side of it, but it's a very real thing that when you challenge somebody's presupposed ideas, um, it can be super super hard on them. So it's good as a leader to recognize where somebody is, and then give them an opportunity to grow, but to try to not be attached to it. It's like, here's a little piece of information if they ask, and take it from there. But it's really good to understand that um, there's a big reality to people that cannot see things because their storyline, their story structure that they've made up, which is very important to them, um, requires that they don't see it, because they're not safe enough to be able to make the adaptation or to adopt the newer storyline. So knowing that this phenomenon, is real, um, when we want to recognize, so the clinical term of this is cognitive dissonance, as far as I understand. The most important question to ask of yourself and anybody that you're in relationship with is your story actually working for the life that you would love to have? So that's where it matters, is that if somebody has a storyline that's not really working for them, if you ask them if the story, whatever the situation is, if it's actually working for them, then you might find yourself with the um, capacity to make a difference. And so a person, you could ask, it's like, so is this way of thinking, is it working really well for you? And they could easily say, yeah, it's working perfectly good. And it's like, oh, okay, well then great. And so it's the odds of you having any capacity to help is really low. But if they recognize that whatever the story is that they're working inside of is not working for them, then you might be able to have the possibility of being able to help them out, providing them with a little bit of a change to how they're seeing things. And it's really good to understand that it's never too late to let go of your story and to start adopting a new one. Your storyline is the story that you rehearse. Your history did not happen exactly the way that you remember it. If you're 6 years old and you fell off your bicycle, and little Joey was, you know, really abrasive and mean to you, and you were hurt, and you really wanted to just kind of go home and whatever, but you got forced to get back on your bike, kind of, through, some sort of social situation. You don't know how to deal with it, and you could harbor a wound. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. You're hurt. You don't understand why the person isn't very supportive. You're only 6 years old. My gosh, you don't even have the neurological capability to understand the whole of the situation. And so you can find yourself in this place where you've made up this story that this other little boy is really mean to you, but maybe from his perspective, he was just really trying to be helpful, and you never really understood that, but you just continued to rehearse the story over and over again about how mean that person was to you. Well, you can change that storyline. It's never too late to have a little bit of a different childhood. You can just make up a different storyline, and just make sure that you can see how you can believe it. It's just like, maybe you had a really bad stepmom that was constantly mean to you or whatever. Maybe you adopt the storyline of just like, what the reality is she was probably doing the best that she could under the circumstances, and she just didn't know how to be a stepmom. It's still true, and you didn't excuse her for what she did, but in that way you can tweak the story that you've made up. Rather than she's just an evil bitch, it's like you can tweak the storyline a little bit better, and if it makes you have a better life, then you've adopted a better story. And the more that you rehearse that story, the more that it will be true for you. And so it's good to know that it's never too late to to move on. And so it's a good suggestion. And it's good from a clinical standpoint to know that nobody really cares about, like, my professional story. If they do, then you want to turn that around a little bit, and have it be more about their story. So, I'm a licensed chiropractor, I'm a wellness educator, I'm a healing facilitator, I'm not an acupuncturist. But people, whether you're a medical doctor, an acupuncturist, a healing facilitator, a shaman, whatever that is, people don't care about your story, about what went wrong when, and these kinds of things. What people really want is, people want help inside of their own storyline. Um, people want to be more involved with themselves. Deeply want a really congruent storyline for themselves, because the more congruent they are inside of the story that they've made up, the more congruent they are, the outpicturing of their reality is going to be more in alignment with what it is that they want. And so this is a lot of like educated thinking stuff. And on a professional side of things, it adds a lot to be in alignment inside of your own physiology. Now, that's not part of really this podcast, but just as I'm talking about that, it's like any technology. There are many martial arts, there are many clinical strategies, whether it's Feldenkrais or Alexander technique or ELAN or BGI. There's a lot of different techniques to help other people become more in alignment with themselves. And so if a person can become congruent with their story, and they can become congruent internally, then you've got at least two things lined up of like a person's storyline and their physiology, and that has very high probability of delivering that person to the destination of where they want. But this one's been about the story that you make up inside of your head. That it's very real. Different people have different perspectives on the life that they're living. Different people from different cultures see things differently, put importances in different places. All of this stuff is very good to understand, and people hold on to their story for very, very good reasons. So it's wise to go slow with people. My life experience says that going slow with people is how you create enduring, lasting change. Really hardcore changes really fast. My life experience say that they have the tendency to be more difficult to integrate, um, but they can make a difference also for sure. But as a healing facilitator, taking care of people, working with them over time, moving slow, challenging their mindset, inviting them into a little bit of a different story when the timing is right. This is how we get long lasting change. And so um, this has been the fourth episode of the Extraordinary Living podcast. And so thank you for being here.